Hello and welcome to Inside Update, where every other week we are catching up about important headlines across Connecticut. As always, this show is brought to you by InsideInvestigator.org. This is our team, and InsideInvestigator.org is our flagship site where you can find all of our daily news, our deep dive investigations, and all the content you need to be informed about what's going on in Connecticut. Today, I am joined by Trisha Ennis and Mark Fitch to talk about a few fantastic stories. First, we're going to talk about Avon. There's a kerfuffle going on about a few fire stations that Mark is going to chat about. We're going to get into an investigation done by Trisha about school cybersecurity. Turns out there's been a lot of money flowing out the door to bad actors who are taking advantage of loopholes in the system. And finally, we're going to put a bow on a FOIA fight in East Windsor. Thumbs up for all those. And let's jump right in. Mark, you were talking about some fire stations and a house that burned down. Really interesting article with some kind of alarming stuff going on. Fill us in.
Sure. So this came to us through our tip channel from a tipster, and everybody out there, please send us your tips. But I was told that a fire station in this little lakeside community in Avon called Secret Lake had pretty much quietly been closed, and nobody had really known about it, especially the neighbors in the area. And that a house had burned down in November of just 2023 with the response time taking about 16 minutes. So I went down there, I drove down there, found the house. It was the one that was burned down. And got my pictures, and I said, all right, well, let me go see where this fire station is. And I literally just went around the bend, and there's the fire station. I could have walked to it at a leisurely pace in a couple minutes. So that none of it's got two fire trucks in it. Neither of those trucks ever left the station for that fire. And so I ended up speaking with the Avon Volunteer Fire Department Chief, Bruce Appel, and he said, yeah, we're not really using it. According to him, they have a lack of volunteers. This is from what I understand, nationwide problem, and certainly a statewide problem. There's not enough, volunteers, people taking the time to join fire departments and things like that. And so he's like, and the few volunteers that we do have in that area, they're stationed at another fire station about 3 miles away. The other part of this, though, is that the town of Canton, which borders Avon, and actually the border cuts right through Secret Lake Road where this fire occurred, they have a station probably less than 2 miles away. It's a very short drive. I drove over there to see where that is too. And because that station's closer, they could establish what's called an automatic aid agreement. And that automatic aid is when the call comes in to dispatch, both fire departments get alerted immediately so they can respond. That has not happened in Avon. Canton, on the other hand, it has automatic aid agreements for people coming into Canton. They want, if there's a fire, they want whoever to come quickly. But Avon has not established an automatic aid agreement with Canton, even though Canton's fire chief offered to do so 2 years ago when the Avon fire chief indicated that they were going to be closing Secret Lake. So he says, we offered. He goes, I offered it in front of 54 different fire chiefs from the Farmington Valley area, and so far it hasn't been taken up. And, in some of my research, I came across a study that the town of Avon had done about redoing their fire station situation in town. And in that study, it says Avon should enter automatic aid agreements with neighboring towns. Bruce Appel was part of the people who informed that study, so he's well aware of it. It just seems to come down to a matter of, the way Appel put it, Avon take care of Avon, Canton take care of Canton. Now, in these situations, they can, if Avon gets there and says, hey, this is a big fire, we need more help, they call Canton and Canton comes, and that's exactly what happened in November. But Canton's trucks still got there before some of Avon's trucks, even though they were called 15 minutes later after the initial dispatch. So it's leaving residents in this lakeside community with a little bit of lag time, to use Bruce Appel's words, in getting a response to, potentially dangerous fires.
So let me ask, I don't think just from that description, I was 100% clear. Who is saying they don't want to have the agreement that arguably would have prevented this particular house, but obviously, who's the logjam with right now?
Well, I mean, it sounds like the log jams with Avon's fire chief, Bruce Appel. He said, to the way he put it is that he goes, we don't want to have a situation where it's this expectation that Avon responds to everything in Canton and Canton responds to everything in Avon. Um, he's like, Avon should take care of Avon and we'll call Canton if we need their help and vice versa. He also, said that, hey, listen, he's like, our next closest fire station is 3 miles away. Canton's about 2 miles away. So there's really not that much of a difference. And he says one of the problems with the Secret Lake Firehouse, I mean, if you go to this neighborhood, they're narrow streets, they have speed bumps, it's this little lakeside community, it's not like giant houses or anything. But I am impressed that they can get a fire truck in there because they're obviously large. He said, so part of the problem with Secret Lake is the response time of getting trucks out of Secret Lake to go to other parts of Canton. So for the past 20 years, the town has actually considered shutting that fire station down. They haven't, but it just kind of sits there unused. And, seems like maybe a lot of people in town weren't aware of that. The Canton fire chief, who I spoke to, John Gutowski, he was like, hey, he's like, listen, to come from the next closest fire station to get into Secret Lake, you actually have to drive into Canton to do it. So, he's like, why? I don't understand why we wouldn't have automatic aid.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of discussion about this. Obviously, since you published this article, we kind of try to keep an eye on the chatter, and I think you're right. A lot of people were not aware of this, and I'll be really curious to see what pressure comes out of the community or what folks decide to do, because there's very clearly some disgruntled folks, but also you really don't want to see houses burning down. I know that is that too controversial a statement to say? We don't want houses burning down. But those solutions seem like they should be forthcoming, which is interesting.
Well, Canton Fire Chief Gutowski, his point was, he goes, I don't care whose name is on the side of the truck, or what color the truck is. I just want the fire out. And if somebody's house is burning down, they're not going to care where the help is coming from.
So true. So true. Mark, thank you for looking into that. And again, thank you to that tipster as well for reaching out. That is one of the best ways that we can get our stories, is folks who are aware of things happening in their communities. Speaking of things happening in our communities, every single community's got a school, and a lot of them are at risk. Trisha, you took a look at some of the landscape issues, also some of the specific problems happening. For those of you who don't know, Trisha is one of the folks on our staff, I'd say the leader in understanding cybersecurity, maybe against her will, taking on our Bitcoin beat as well. But you did take a look at this investigation, Hacked: Cybersecurity in Connecticut Schools. What do folks need to know?
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy with fewer crypto stories, but I do think cybersecurity, especially as it pertains to schools and hospitals and major organizations like that, is going to be a major talking point for the foreseeable future. It's an industry that's only going to get bigger and only going to need more people. So it's very secure in terms of job security, but not so secure in terms of actual informational security, which is what I wanted to talk about. So I got on this subject because I have actually in previous reporting been, not party, but been on beats that talk about cybersecurity in schools, and have actually like witnessed and found data caches that were stolen from school districts as a result of ransomware attacks. We've all suddenly become very aware of what ransomware is, I think culturally in the US, because it's become such a big problem. And it's only gotten worse when it comes to places like public schools and and hospitals. I didn't want to focus on hospitals this time around. I did want to focus on schools because I think that that's something that we don't think about that often. That schools house a lot of personal data, and also have to deal with a lot of money and a lot of vendors that they have to work with, and all of these things that can be victims of hacking, of cyber attacks. So I wanted to get sort of an idea of what it's like in Connecticut. And in my research and in my talking to some folks at the state level who work on this, I found that Connecticut schools do encounter some cybersecurity threats, and they are varied. I expected to find a lot more ransomware than I did. It actually has been a lot more targeted than that. So the biggest headline of the last, 6 months to a couple of years has been New Haven Public Schools. The district had an intrusion into their servers. Basically, a district employee's email account was hacked, and they used the account to impersonate the employee and authorize millions of dollars worth of payments to vendors. And the vendors never received those payments because they'd set up dummy accounts. So they were impersonating both sides of the conversation to make it look legitimate to anyone who looked for it. And the district actually ended up losing $6 million in that. Before anyone noticed what was going on, they eventually realized that there was a problem. And one of the vendors was the school bus vendor. They was like $1.5 million to the school bus vendor. They have since gotten back about half of that money through the investigation, just through recovery efforts. So they have been making improvements there, but it was an obvious vulnerability. And unfortunately, so much of this stuff is so easy to become victim to. You click on the wrong link in an email. I think the thing that I was most interested in my conversation, and I go into it in some detail in the story, is speaking with the director of CEN, which is the Connecticut Education Network, who provides internet access to public schools in Connecticut and also provides some level of security, and also the state's chief information security officer, was that there are two major issues with public schools. One, they have a lot of employees and they have a lot of students. And especially because of the pandemic, everyone is using a laptop or a tablet. They're using something that's connected to the internet. There's a lot more connectivity that's happening at schools, which means a lot more people with a lot more possible vulnerabilities. And there's only so much you can do to educate everybody on exactly what to do, especially when you're talking about kids. But even adults, like a lot of adults don't realize that you need to be careful of what emails you click on. You need to be careful of how your network is set up. You need to be careful of so many things, and you need to not accidentally fall victim to these things. And it's very easy to do when you're not thinking about it all the time. And the other main issue is that while they have a lot of employees and a lot of students and a lot of people online, they do not have enough funding and do not have enough employees who are dedicated to information security at the district level. So there aren't enough people who are spending time upgrading systems. There aren't enough people spending time educating people on cybersecurity or running cybersecurity checks on the systems to make sure everything is secure and good. And there aren't enough people who are able to combat the issues when they do pop up, because it's hard to get people to care about something that's kind of abstract.
It seems, I mean, I'm thinking back to, when I was in middle school, they gave every single kid a laptop. And in hindsight, I have so much more respect for the one person I remember being in charge of cybersecurity for a middle school, because that's a nightmare job. And I think your investigation did a good job bringing out that human element of these folks who, in some ways, I felt like the folks who you interviewed were throwing up their hands saying, good God, someone, let's just have some awareness about this, because we're really working hard and we can't do everything.
Yeah, I mean, people who work in InfoSec, who do cybersecurity as their actual job, they know what the risks are. They know what people need to do, and I mean, it's probably the same in every occupation, right? If you know a lot about a subject, you know what needs to be done to properly deal with that thing. But it's really hard to educate someone and to convince someone who doesn't know anything about the subject that those things are necessary. Because so if you think about, like, if you've never experienced hacking on your machine, if you've never had a problem in your district, if you've never actually experienced the issue, it can seem like something that isn't important, right? It can seem like, oh yeah, but we're doing fine. Like, we've never had that problem. It's not going to happen to us. But it's not going to happen to you until it does, right? Like, you need to make sure it doesn't happen to you, because the risk that it could happen to you is high. And the thing that you are risking in terms of how much data you can give over to people, how much, like, there's a lot of identity theft that can happen. There's a lot of things that can happen if someone gets access to your system that you really, really don't want to happen. And sometimes it's just the one thing that they talked about was how hard it is just getting that level of awareness and understanding and acceptance of the problem to actually convince people that they need to throw more money into this, that they need to hire more people. That is one of the main burdens, like one of the main barriers to real cybersecurity protections in public schools.
And plus, they keep getting more
Connor,
kids. New people need to learn the systems every single year.
New people, new teachers, new faculty, new staff, any new person that comes into the district, any new person you have to add to your system, you have to educate them. You have to make sure they know what not to click on, right?
Geez, Connor, you were given laptops in middle school? I mean, making
It
me
was.
feel really old. They gave me floppy disks. I bet if
Yeah.
we went back to the floppy disk, I bet we could probably fix a lot of this.
Yeah.
You know, the first ever piece of malware was actually delivered on floppy disks.
Oh,
Man, I get all my solutions. You just shoot them down.
you used to have to work hard to be a good hacker. You know, you had to get in there
You did.
physically with a floppy disk and put the thing into the computer. Kids these days, right? You're
You used to have to use the mail.
exactly. Yes, exactly. All right, if let's move on to FOIA because I like this story, Mark. This was the bow on a long series. You've been writing about East Windsor and this FOIA fight for upwards of a year now, I believe, as this is unfolded. What's the resolution here?
Yeah, so I think it's probably a year. So this all relates to the Scout Hall redevelopment in East Windsor. They're taking this youth center and they're going to expand it into a multi-purpose senior center thing. It's going to cost about $4.5 to $5 million. It's been a contentious subject in town. There were two vote referendums on whether to do this. The first one failed narrowly. The second one passed by a wide margin. But one of the residents, a woman named Lynn Stanley, she filed a Freedom of Information request to the first selectman's office asking for, all the cost estimates, emails, all this kind of stuff. Well, a rather sizable request. And things got, pretty contentious over the FOI request fairly quickly as well. She filed a request in November. By January, they still hadn't produced it. Basically, the town was running everything through the town's attorney at a cost of, First Selectman Bowser said $10,000 to have him go through everything because they were worried she was going to be litigious. I'm not sure about what exactly, and so January came around, she still didn't have her documents. She filed a Freedom of Information complaint. When the documents were produced, they wanted to charge her $20 per visit just to come in and look at them, or $700 to take them home. And the first selectman stacked them all up on his desk at a Board of Selectmen meeting, which was videotaped live, called her out by name and said that this was a vexatious request and had some, not very nice things to say. During the actual investigation of the FOI request, the first selectman admitted that he had no written estimate for that Scout Hall redevelopment when they put it to referendum in November of 2022. It was just basically, hey, somebody told me it'd be about $4.5 million, but they didn't have anything in writing. So that obviously wasn't part of the FOI request. So, she had some of the things that they had given her were redacted. Some of the things they withheld. So under FOI law, you can withhold anything that's attorney-client privilege. You can withhold draft documents. And the town attorney and the first selectman, figured, hey, this is a very contentious project. We don't want to release these draft things. It could screw up the bidding process. And the FOI commission had basically agreed with them on that. They were forced to turn over a couple documents that they had redacted, But I thought the most interesting part was the FOI Commission's reaction to how those town officials conducted themselves during this FOI process. Trying to charge her $20 to come in and look at the, per day to come in and look at the documents. Sending out, calling her her request vexatious, which means that you're essentially trying to use the FOI laws to harass government officials and gum up the works. She only made one request. It's not, that is not, we've seen vexatious requests before. That's not one of them.
We've got a whole investigation on it. Please check that out. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes, which is linked in the article. So yeah, the commission had a lot to say about how the town officials handled themselves. And yeah, some of the redacted documents did have to be given over. I think in the end, it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory for Lynn Stanley. But the commissioners were like, we need to put some footnotes in here to admonish these officials in trying to do these kind of things and essentially trying to, scare people out of making FOI requests in the future. I mean, if you ask your government for something, that you're interested in and you want to know about, and that is your right. But to then have that government official call you out by name in a public meeting and chastise you for it, it's a little bit of, not a good look. And it's not really what they're supposed to do as public servants.
Is that common? I mean, I had not seen an admonishment previously. Is that something that you had seen before in any of the FOIA rulings that you've reviewed?
Oh, well, sometimes they'll do more than that. They debated sending the town of East Windsor back to FOI training. They had supposedly just recently had one. So they're like, well, if they recently had one, maybe we don't need to do that. But we do want to register our displeasure with the way this was done.
For sure. Well, it's good to have that wrapped up, and I'll be curious to see if we have more information coming out of East Windsor in the future related to FOIA topics, especially if
it's a small town with a lot of noise.
It really is. It really is. I've been so excited to see. We've had a couple articles in the last couple of weeks focusing on communities that don't have this daily news coverage, where we've been able to be invited in by tipsters to take a closer look. And at least I'd like to think that we can bring that value to communities across Connecticut. So, not to pitch it too hard again, but tipsters are very important. And I think that if you're frustrated with something that's going on in your town, reach out to us. We enjoy it. We really value those conversations, but they're value added right back to the community as well to get some of these problems fixed. Trisha and Mark, other articles that you're excited about? Anything coming up? Any other requests for tips or topics from the public?
I mean, my constant request for tips from the public is, I think, the only thing that I'd reiterate, which you basically already did, which, especially if there are things happening in your community, smaller things that other people aren't able to cover. Maybe you don't have a community paper, or you just can't get the interest generated that you like. We want to hear about it, and we want to see if we can do anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, what I say to people is there's 169 towns in Connecticut. There's no way we can watch them all. So if there's something going on that you think we might be interested in, I mean, that's really what gives us our most unique pieces is, when somebody comes forward and they're like, hey, this is happening to me, or this is happening in my town, and we don't think it's right. This is the story, so that's always the biggest help, because there's too many towns, too many players, too many things going on for us to watch all of them. So we need direction,
Without a doubt. And I'll say, if you are interested in us eventually being able to have an investigative reporter for each of the 169 towns in Connecticut, you love what we do, please consider becoming a donor to our nonprofit newsroom. You can go to insideinvestigator.org, hit that donate button in the top right-hand corner, and join the ranks of those who do support our journalism. Huge thank you to all of our subscribers, our supporters, and all of you who watch, listen, and support us. It literally allows us to do what we do, and we love it. So thank you. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, be well, stay safe, and stay informed.